Tonight with Lisa Grant.
Welcome back. Has it really been a week already? Waiting on the phone for me right now, I have money manager and economist, our very own Money Santa Claus, I think I'll refer to him. I'm just sitting here thinking of you, Jonathan, with, let's sing, a red hat with a white fur collar and Rudolph's nose.
Perhaps after 20 whiskies. Which does actually remind me, if I can just tell you about last Christmas. On Christmas Eve, before we put the kids to bed, we put out a carrot for Rudolph and a mince pie and a glass of whiskey for Santa. Curiously, in the morning, when our children got up, they saw that half of the mince pie and the carrot had gone, but it's amazing, all of the whiskey had gone.
Yeah, interesting that, isn't it? But of course, you have to bear in mind that when Santa Claus is out and about, he drinks a lot of milk, and it may be cold milk. So every so often, he may take a little bit of a drink of some whiskey to keep himself warm, because it's cold in that sleigh, you know.
Yes, that's what we tell the children as well.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. And it's only a few more sleeps till Christmas. So any kids who are listening, start planning what you're going to put out for Santa, because he does like to have a munch on something. So, what are we looking at as far as the financial world is looking like? I mean, the long-term refinancing operation from the ECB. Can they actually call it that?
Well, of course, they can call it whatever they like, just like the powers that be have been calling printing money quantitative easing for the last few years.
Yes.
A phrase which had never been uttered in economic journals ever until 2008. It's just a phrase. Long-term refinancing operation, about 500 billion euros handed out today, or was it yesterday? Yesterday, I think, to about 500 banks. In other words, about €1 billion each. These banks were able to borrow at very preferential rates for up to 3 years to help them get over a liquidity crisis. In other words, they need cash to run their operations. Well, it isn't going to help them get over liquidity, because it's not a liquidity issue. It's a solvency issue.
Sorry to interrupt you, Jonathan. Let's give a definition of liquidity.
Liquidity is, as I said, do you have the cash to run your operations, to pay your bills and pay back the debts that you have? Solvency is, are you actually profitable, or are you in fact going down the pan? And the reality is that with a vast amount of debt that the governments have borrowed from these banks, which will never be repaid, of course, everyone is insolvent. That's the reality.
Now, this is supposed to be a 3-year long term to actually, as you say, to help them out. What's going to happen at the end of 3 years when I would have thought a majority of the banks turn around and say, well, actually, I can't give you any of the money back? What are they going to do, renegotiate?
Well, that's stepping ahead, because even in 2012, which, as we know, is just a couple of weeks from now, during next year, there's going to be a need for refinancing of 3 times as much as this financing yesterday, 1,600 billion euros. So we won't get to 3 years. It won't get that far. The fact is, the banking system is in a state of collapse. That it hasn't collapsed yet is still a wonder to me. It's amazing how much these people can fudge and continue to kick the can down the line. But we truly are practically at the end of the line, if not at the end of the line. There's only so far they can go. So next year, or maybe 18 months from now, about that, by that time, we will see great havoc in the market, I'm afraid to say.
I've got to ask you a question. How come the ECB ruled out lending money directly to countries, but has put it in the hands of banks who, let's face it, haven't got the greatest reputation at the moment?
Well, because as I've been trying to express on your show these last few months, politicians and central bankers are all about bailing out their friends. And you say, quite rightly, that the ECB is not allowed to print money to hand to governments. But you know what? Actually, it wouldn't be about bailing out governments. It would be an indirect route to bailing out the banks. So all they're doing is circumventing the ECB's own rules and handing it directly to the banks, because that's actually what bailing out governments means. It means bailing out the banks. So they're just handing 500 billion euros, which is actually the taxpayers' money. That's what's so ugly about all this.
What has been the general reaction within your profession?
Yesterday the stock market soared in the United States after the announcement. The stock market went up 3% in one day. In Europe, whereas the market was generally down all day, it closed up 1 to 2%. So the markets loved it. They thought, the banks are getting refinanced here. It's great news. But the reality, the hangover, it's like the day after the party. Today, markets are down because now that they've put their numbers through their calculators, they actually realise that it still doesn't come anywhere near what is needed. The point I'm trying to make is the ECB or the Federal Reserve or the Bank of England or the Bank of Japan or whoever it is, they can print as much money as they want, but it's not going to solve the problem. You cannot get out of debt by creating more debt. That is a simple reality.
Well, yeah, and even people like me who don't know much about this stuff know that. All right, well, let's keep stocks and shares in mind. In the papers today, 2011, the year that all stock markets failed to deliver, but at least Britain wasn't among the worst. I'm looking at this list down here. You've got, they put it in alphabetical order. Australia, minus 15.75%, and then at the bottom, United States, minus 4.58%, and then everyone in between. Everyone has taken some serious knocks. I am surprised to hear that Britain isn't the worst, though, and the reason I say that is from all the things you've said over the last few months, and also from the amount that people have been moaning and complaining about the fact that they're not making money in the city.
Well, very few people are making money in the financial world in 2011 because apart from anything, when general inflation is around about 5%, you've clearly got to make 5% just to keep your purchasing power. But the fact is, no, most stock markets, pretty well all stock markets, are actually down up to this point since the 1st of January, or maybe up very, very slightly. So practically very few people are making money in the city, that's for sure. But again, I must reiterate, the city is not the real economy. There's been a concerted effort over many years, if not decades, to make people believe that what's good for the city is good for the man and woman in the street. I must emphasise, because we've lavished so much money on the city, that's the reason why the economy is in dire straits. That's why your listeners are finding it harder and harder to get by every single month. We need to stop handing money to banks, but of course they won't, because it's all they know, hence what happened yesterday.
With the new government being sworn in here in Spain, did you see any fluctuation in Spain's shares and the activity financially over here?
I have to say I haven't seen anything, but then again I haven't looked either.
Okay.
So I'm afraid I have no comment at this on that this evening.
Okay.
Comment next week, but I haven't noticed anything.
Yeah, if we could talk about it next week, that would be fabulous. Okay, let's move on to Moody's. Ratings agency Moody's has given the UK high scores for economic governance, but warns the country it faces formidable and rising challenges.
We've talked about these rating agencies in the past. You've got Standard & Poor's, you've got Fitch, and you've got Moody's, who are the three big US rating agencies. Largely, what they come out with is not worth the paper it's written on. I remind your listeners that these were the guys who were taking vast amounts of money to give mortgage-backed securities in 2004, 5, 6, 7 AAA ratings. These were the guys who were taking vast amounts of money to give AAA rating to European banks, Irish banks, Dexia, all the Spanish banks who are kaput. They are toast. They are totally insolvent. So, that they are saying that the United Kingdom still has a AAA rating is one of the biggest economic jokes on the planet, because it is a simple fact that the United Kingdom has 10 times its economy as debt. 10 times our annual economy is the amount of our debts. When, to compare, average across the EU is 5 times the size of the economy. We are the most indebted nation in the West on a per capita basis, the most indebted nation. And for any organisation to say that we're AAA rated, well, it's total nonsense. Our economy is going down the pan, and that will become absolutely blindingly self-evident over the next months and years.
I'm just wondering why the rating agencies, with such bad press and bad reactions from people such as yourself, why do they still get as much press as they do, and why are they still so highly regarded?
I would say because it's convenient. Largely speaking, they utter what those with power and influence want them to utter. So they are given a lot of airtime, a lot of press, a lot of credence, should I say, but actually they have no credibility. There are other ratings agencies which are far stricter, far more objective, but like people like me, I am sometimes in the mainstream media in the UK, but generally speaking, people like me and ratings agencies who are far more objective are given very little press, very little airtime indeed.
Okay. Let's move our attention over to Italy now, and their economy has shrunk by 0.2%, fueling recession fears.
Fueling recession fears. Yes, I did see that headline. How could they not be in recession? I mean, it's a strange way that these headline writers create the immediate picture in people's minds. Well, of course, Italy's in recession, and indeed most of the EU is in recession. If you run a small business, you would know that. If you run a small professional practice, you would know it. If you're in banking, you would know it. Everyone knows that we're in recession. So for a headline writer to write, there's a fear of recession, well, again, it's laughable.
It does actually make you wonder that when people write headlines, they tend to go for the jugular with these things. And I understand it. It's to catch attention, but to not have it actually falling in line with what everyone else has been saying for months is a bit of a worry, really.
Well, you said it.
It is. It's a bit of a worry. Okay, we've got to turn our attention to confectionery because, of course, it is Christmas and we are in a festive mood, are we not? It may all be doom and gloom when it comes to economics, but it is Christmas. Thornton's... I actually love Thornton's chocolate. Huge fan. Whenever I go over to the UK, I have to go in and I have to have the fudge and the chocolate and all that kind of thing. But it would appear they're not having a very good Christmas when all is said and done.
Well, Thornton's is one of these businesses that I have marvelled at for the last 2 or 3 years. As our economy has gradually been getting more and more disjointed, as unemployment has risen, as incomes have fallen, and so on. And yet, up until last Christmas, Thornton's continued to sail on regardless. They charged vast amounts of money for their produce, and they had queues round the corner, as it were. And I put it down to, it's one of these businesses that it's the ultimate luxury brand, or one of the ultimate luxury brands. There are lots of other companies or services. I'm thinking of relaxation services, dog walking, all that kind of stuff that ultimately you could do it yourself, but if you've got the dosh, or you can borrow it, then you pay someone else to do it. And similarly, you can either pay a pound for a bar of chocolate in the supermarket, or you can pay £10 at Thornton's. And what's happening with Thornton's now is their share price in the last 2 days has fallen 40%. In other words, the consumer in the UK is finally, after years of putting on the plastic, is finally retrenching. Not because I think they're doing it voluntarily, but because they ain't got any more money and they've got no access to more debt. The credit cards have been maxed out. They're up to their eyeballs in debt. They cannot remortgage their houses because house prices are falling, so they can't take out more debt. And it's directly impacting businesses like Thornton's. And interestingly, I was actually in Thornton's this afternoon. I was walking around my town centre, the shopping mall, and I just popped in to see what was going on. Interestingly, they've cut their prices in half. I don't know when they did it, but they have done. And you know what? They're still very expensive for what they are, in my humble opinion.
I have to say, in my humble opinion, I absolutely love them. I give myself a little treat if I'm over in the UK, and I do have to indulge. I absolutely do. Their stuff is yummy.
if I can make a call on chocolate, Leonidas from Belgium, my wife and I swear by it as gorgeous, and I'm pretty sure it's not nearly as expensive as Thornton chocolate, and I would suggest it's even better. But hey-ho, we'll have perhaps a taste test at some point in the future.
So what are you doing over Christmas?
Oh, very quiet. A lovely affair, just the family. And we'll go out and see family, and we'll have family round and things like that.
You were telling the story about Santa Claus and drinking the whiskey, which, as we said, is quite understandable because it gets cold up there in that sleigh. A friend of mine, her son decided to say to her, I'm too old to be believing in Santa Claus anymore. I don't believe him anymore, which is sacrilege as far as I'm concerned. But,
anyone suggest such
I know, absolutely. And you can put the presents under the tree. You go and buy them. I know you do. You go and buy them and put them under the tree. So that's what they did, and they left them there for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
He came down Christmas morning, and they were gone. And all that was there was a note that said, I'm extremely angry that you got your parents to do my job this year. I only work 1 day of the year. This is the truth. I only work 1 day of the year, and I'm horrified to find that you made your parents go out and buy presents when I had a load for you. He then had to follow clues to find the presents, and he found, of course, extra ones that Santa had left him as well. But Santa was not happy. Quite understandably as well.
Well, as they say, Santa's only human.
Absolutely. Well, Jonathan, have a wonderful, wonderful Christmas and a very happy New Year to you. You will be popping in over Christmas, I know. But
yes, I'm looking forward to that.
Have a lovely Christmas, and you'll have to tell me what you get.
I will do. Merry Christmas to you. And while we're cold and shivering here, and maybe we might get some snow, we'll think of you drinking your cocktails on the beach.
Have a lovely one. I'll speak to you next week.
Bye-bye. Bye.